Hello class, I'm Instructor Hollon, and this is part 2 of our lecture on problems with utilitarianism. And I wanted to turn specifically to the trolley problem and talk about it in more detail. The trolley problem is probably the most significant problem for utilitarianism. A number of issues arise from consideration of two dissimilar cases. And one frequent charge is that the theory ignores the criteria to judge the application of the principle of double effect. The principle of double effect. This set of criteria states that an action having foreseen harmful effects, practically inseparable from the good effect, is justifiable if the following are true. And there are three conditions. The nature of the act is itself good, or at least morally neutral. 2. The agent intends the good effect, but not the bad, either as a means to the good or as an end itself. And 3. The good effect outweighs the bad effect in circumstances sufficiently grave to justify causing the bad effect, and the agent exercises due diligence to minimize the harm. Okay. So if you're confronted with a situation where you have to choose to bring about a good effect, but you see that there is a harmful effect that could be brought about as a corollary, or that is inseparable as a corollary, you can only do that good action if in fact the nature of the action is itself. You can only do that action if in fact the nature of the action is good, or at least morally neutral. If you only intend to bring about the good and not the bad, either as a means to the good or as an end in itself, and you give due diligence to minimizing harm that's brought about by the action. Okay, so having considered the definition for the principle of double effect, we'll look at the trolley cases. You can find more information on the principle of double effect in Kavanaugh, Double Effect Reasoning, Doing Good and Avoiding Evil, with Oxford Clarendon Press, and he's also cited on the Wikipedia as a popular source. So now let's look at the two trolley cases. Imagine a scenario where there are 5 people standing stationary on a track. From a distance, you can see a trolley that is out of control and on head-on collision with the 5 people standing on the track. Now you could tell from the speed of the trolley that the lives of the 5 people are in danger. You know that the trolley will kill them. Now, there's a switch by you. You see this from a distance, and you can throw the switch and move the trolley onto another track. In this case, you will save the lives of the 5 people. The only problem is there's one other person on this track who doesn't know what's going on. So if you throw this lever, you save the lives of 5, but it looks like one person will be killed. What do we do? Well, the principle of double effect says you can throw the lever, because that action in itself is morally neutral. It's just throwing a lever. You intend to bring about a good effect, saving the lives of 5 others, and you see there's a corollary, a harmful effect that could be brought about, but that you don't intend. You don't want that to be the case. You hope dearly that it's not the case, of course. But it could be inseparable from the action. But so long as you don't intend that action, and your aim overall is to minimize harm to the public, then you can throw this lever by the principle of double effect. Okay, and the idea there is that if you don't act, if you don't throw the lever, 5 people will die, and that's worse than one person dying. There's something there. So the principle of double effect says you're trying to make for greater public safety. Now, you can use this principle with different ethical theories. It's consistent with different ethical theories. So if you hold to a version of deontology today or natural law theory, you can justify throwing the lever and use the principle of double effect as well. Say, for Ross, he has a version of deontology where duties and rules are graded. Okay? Some are more important than others. So maybe in this case, that can justify throwing this lever because you have a greater duty to keep the public safe. and to minimize harm for the public, the greater good of the public, so to say. It's not necessarily a quantifiable claim, just general rule. Concern for public safety, and that would mean you can justifiably throw the switch because of the principle of double effect. So you could, on natural law theory, you could think very much the same way, but you'll look more at other factors like the potential for the five to live and reproduce, and the greater benefits of just nature for themselves. So the utilitarian will say, yeah, you should throw the switch in this case as well. And so many theories can line up on this. There are some who think you shouldn't throw the switch. That's not a decision you can make. Okay, and there's arguments for that. I find them harder to believe, but they do. There are people that do think that way about these trolley cases. So I just want to mention that in passing. Okay, it looks to me though clearly that we should try to minimize the pain and suffering that happens in the world. So we should throw this switch because that's a morally neutral act, and we intend to bring about a greater benefit and minimize suffering than not. And even if that means there are unintended but foreseeable negative consequences that are they're corollary or follow with our actions. They're not directly caused by it, but they follow through some sequence of chains of causes. Okay, so there's another version though of the trolley case where it's like the first one, but you don't have the option of throwing a switch. In this second version, to stop the trolley, you have to push a man from a bridge and push him in front of the trolley, derail the trolley, and that will save the lives of the five others. Okay, now the principle of double effect says you cannot do that action because that in that case you intentionally caused the bad effect to bring about the good effect, and that was already excluded. You cannot do that. You cannot intend to bring about the bad effect. So in this case, because you intentionally have to murder the man and throw him from the bridge, you cannot do it by the principle of double effect. Okay, but utilitarianism says, well, actually you can. If the outcome is what matters and you save the lives of five people, then it's identical morally to the other trolley case where you throw the switch. The only thing that matters for utilitarianism is the outcomes, and in both cases you save the lives of five people by sacrificing one, so they're morally identical to the utilitarian. Okay, that's where the problem arises. When we ask people when we ask them to respond to the trolley case, what they think about the trolley cases, and in surveys that psychologists give and ethicists give, the vast majority of people think there's a moral distinction between these two cases. They're not always able to explain what it is, but they see a difference between throwing a switch to save five and unintentionally bringing about a harmful effect, and a case where you intentionally murder someone to bring about a good effect. Okay, so they see some difference there, and utilitarianism just says no, there's none, and it doesn't have the conceptual resources theoretically to make a moral distinction between those two cases. That's the problem that the trolley problem. That's the trolley problem for utilitarianism. That's the trolley problem, the problem the two trolley cases raises for the theory. Okay. Now there's an analog to this case in the real world, a hypothetical medical application. A terminal patient has been receiving treatment for third-degree burns and is near death. And the amount of pain medication needed to alleviate the pain also poses a potential risk to their life by way of overdose or slowing the heart or something like that. There is simply no other way to alleviate the pain though, and the doctors need to do something because the patient is in excruciating pain and soon to die. Okay? In this case, the principle of double effect permits prescribing the pain medication so long as you intend to alleviate the pain of the patient and their suffering and their last moments of life and not cause additional harm. Still, in this case, the medication could kill the patient, but it's a foreseen but unintended consequence. Okay. Now imagine there are 8 additional patients whose lives could be saved if the patient with the third-degree burns dies, because they each need an organ that can be harvested from the recently deceased burn victim. So what that presents us with then is a way to think about the burn victim case in a similar way that we think about the two trolley cases. Okay, the two burn victim cases then become one where you prescribe pain medication to alleviate the pain and suffering of the burn victim in their last hours of life and accidentally kill them. And another case where you intentionally kill the burn victim patient. Okay, in the first case, you prescribe the medication to alleviate pain and suffering, and by accident, unintentionally, you kill the patient. The physicians kill the patient with the pain medication. Okay, now in that case, you still can harvest the organs and save the lives of the 8 others. In the second case, because you can save the lives of the 8 others, you should kill the patient. This is what the utilitarian theory says. So whether it was an accident or not, because the outcome is the same, you save the lives of 8 other patients in the hospital, the cases are morally identical once again. So utilitarianism doesn't take account of it doesn't take account of the way an intention brings about an action, and accident factors into our moral assessment of these 2 different burn victim cases, and so then also the trolley cases. Okay, so according to the utilitarian, whether we try to prescribe medication and accidentally kill the burn victim or we intentionally kill them, the actions are morally identical so long as we can harvest the organs and save the lives of the 8 others. And that's where there's a big problem, because we see a clear moral difference between trying to help someone and accidentally bringing about harm as opposed to intentionally bringing about the harm. That looks like it makes for some moral difference there. Whatever that difference is, there's just some difference there that utilitarianism cannot account for. Okay. So utilitarians can respond to the trolley case, and there's 2 responses that I found that are the most plausible. Okay, the first one is that they can question the principle of double effect, and some utilitarians say that principle looks hard to apply, and it's hard to understand. It's hard to apply in some cases, so it's not very helpful. So the tactic or the strategy there is to say, you can't use this principle to morally distinguish between the 2 actions that you find distinguishable. And so they're trying to collapse the way that our means of distinguishing these 2 cases morally, so they can be held morally equivalent. Okay. The problem there is what I found in the assigned reading, they mention it. There's not a lot of work that shows convincingly that there is a problem with the principle of double effect, but a lot of work has been produced that has raised problems with various formulations of the principle, but we still use it frequently, and so it looks more likely that the principle looks more likely true than not. That's the problem. And the principle of double effect is widely recognized in the medical field. So there's some concern with that strategy. It doesn't look the most promising to me, but I note it because it's one the utilitarians can take. Utilitarians have a better response, though. I think they can try to use rule utilitarianism to accommodate the right outcome in the second trolley case or in the second burn victim case, and avoid the counterexamples, right? Or resolve the problems. So the strategy there is to say, hey, look, according to rule utilitarianism, we should throw the lever in the first case, but we shouldn't push the man from the ledge in the second case, because there's a general rule that says murdering people is wrong and brings about greater harm than good. And the idea there is that if people murdered people when they thought they could to bring about greater effects, there would be chaos in the long run, because murder violates order and our mutual trust and understanding in society. So there would be too adverse of an effect if people could get away with murdering people, even if they thought it was for some greater good. So the idea there is to try to accommodate the right outcome in the second trolley case and say, you shouldn't push this man from the ledge, because if other people did similarly, there would be worse effects to society. And so as a utilitarian, rule utilitarianism, I'm going to say, don't push the man, and I'm still interested in outcomes. Okay. Now, the problem with that response is it raises a couple of other problems for itself. Okay. The first one is that it looks like we can revise the rules a little bit and then therefore justify murdering people only in rare cases, so long as it produces benefit to society. So a rule might be that when you find yourself in a situation where you can get away with murder to bring about a greater effect, and no one really will know about it, that she that she fudged up there, and you did produce this immediate greater benefit, so long as enough people don't find themselves in this very rare situation, then happiness will still be maximized for the majority of people. So it looks like there's a problem with formulating the right rule to justify not pushing the man from the bridge as a rule utilitarian. Okay. Now the second problem is that it's hard to judge the outcomes of, and this is related to the first one, it's hard to judge all the outcomes of the action. And this is also related to a previous argument at which we looked in part 1 of the lecture on problems with utilitarianism. So if you can't always tell the outcomes of the action, then you can't tell if you should use a rule or not. And that's a problem for rule utilitarianism in hybrid theories, where you might use act and rule depending on the context. And so in this case, you would just end up using rule. So in more detail, then you say, as a rule utilitarian, you shouldn't push the man from the bridge. But what if the man is a serial killer and the 5 people on the bridge are all promising budding humanitarians who work for some charity that promises to produce some great benefit for society? Well, in that case, the utilitarian would say, push the man from the bridge, right? So because the outcomes are hard to judge, it's kind of hard to tell whether or not you can use rule utilitarianism in this case to justify not pushing the man from the bridge. So it's not sure that rule utilitarianism can give you the right outcome in that second trolley case. Okay, so those are some problems that rule utilitarianism faces, and these are the problems that the trolley cases raise for utilitarianism, otherwise known as the trolley problem for utilitarianism. Utilitarianism can be used to justify what look like patently immoral actions in the name of the greater good. So we've looked at utilitarianism and the trolley cases, the 2 burn victim cases, and we looked at the rule utilitarian response, the most promising response, rule utilitarian response, and then some objections to that response. Okay. If you have any questions on this material, please feel free to send me an email, or to chime in discussion forum, or stop in on virtual office hours on Zoom, and I'm happy to help you with any answers or guidance that I can provide. Enjoy the multimedia that I also linked in the weekly module. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.